Hello and welcome to the Purpose Pursuit podcast with me, Hannah Miller. We are in the middle of a mini-series where we're looking at purpose, which is no great surprise, but we're particularly looking at the difference purpose makes. And this episode is about the difference purpose makes to the Sunday Scaries, because purpose can break the Sunday Scaries. This episode is about that anticipatory dread that many of us can feel about going to work on a Monday. Your Sunday Scaries might not be a Sunday. They could be a different day of the week, depending on what your week looks like or the rhythms you're in. But the Sunday Scaries is this anticipatory dread where we're thinking and feeling overwhelm or anxiety or just lack of unsettled feelings around what's going to happen on Monday morning. And we were talking in preparation for this episode about Sunday Scaries and remembering those moments when we were back at school, feeling like that. I didn't hate school, actually. I quite enjoyed it most of the time. But there were times when I was like, oh, gosh, it's school in the morning. And we were talking about the things that used to kind of cue the Sunday Scaries for us because perhaps we hadn't done our homework or things that, you know, we were feeling a bit rubbish about going back to work going back to school in a more difficult season. And Matt was saying how the country file music, he could hear that and that would act as this kind of trigger of, oh, here we go, I've got to get myself ready for school again. And I was saying how Antiques Roadshow music or Ski Sunday, which I did a little if you haven't ever heard the Ski Sunday music because you're too young, you should go listen to it because it's brilliant. But that music was kind of like, oh, the weekend is coming to an end. I've got some homework to do. I'm not ready. I've got to go back to school. And all those feelings of anticipatory anxiety or misery kick in. Sunday night blues. And this doesn't necessarily go away. There may be periods of time where it does, but then there can be periods of time where the Sunday Scaries come back with an absolute vengeance. And there's a couple of different types of Sunday Scaries, and we're going to talk about the ways it shows up or what's causing it, and how prevalent it is, and also what we can do about it. So there was an Exeter University piece of research that we're going to look at into Sunday Scaries. And we're looking at, you know, what kind 75% of 18 to 25-year-olds felt they had Sunday Scaries. So they were the highest affected group, but actually 2/3 of Britons regularly appreciate this feeling. So there's a lot of us out there that have this slump where the weekend comes to a close or whatever your end of weekend is, and they go into this kind of anticipatory anxiety where they are dreading what is coming. And the problem is, it isn't just an emotion or a feeling. It really impacts the way we feel. It can have a massive impact on our sleep. That's one of the things that it can happen. And actually, I used to be a teacher and I was reflecting on how Sunday nights, I often found it hard to sleep. Partly because you know you've got to get up early and you've got to get out the front door, but also your brain has kicked into gear of thinking about all the things you've got happening in the morning. And so your mind starts worrying. And so rather than getting the good quality sleep that you want, the exact opposite happens. 80% of adults say they have trouble falling asleep on a Sunday compared to other days of the week. And 33% of adults say that they often or always have trouble falling asleep on a Sunday. So it is the hardest night of the week to fall asleep. You are not alone if Sunday nights are causing you a challenge. You're not alone if you have the feeling of the Sunday Scaries. Now, it could be that your Sunday Scaries are just simply because your life is busy and your work is busy, or they could be a sign that it's time for you to be moving on to something else. So I think the first question I want to ask you when you're considering the Sunday Scaries and when you're experiencing it, and when I'm using that phrase, I mean any day of the week where this is happening, you need to ask yourself, what is the root cause of this set of experiences that I'm having? What is the root cause of my Sunday Scaries? Now, what's important for us all to know is that one of the reasons we find it hard, according to the research, is that it's because it's a transition time. We have been in weekend mode, whatever your weekend might look like, and we are transitioning into work mode. And so transitions are just generally quite jarring. I talk a lot about transition, like big transitions of life. They are unsettling, difficult periods of life where we don't find it quite easy, as easy with our emotions and how we're feeling. And so one of the reasons we're feeling this on a Sunday is because our mind, our body is transitioning from one mode to another mode. And we don't always find that easy. And if you're already stressed and you've got a latent feeling of stress in your work or busyness or, hustle culture or that feeling of always being available, you are going to have a heightened fearing of Sunday Scaries. I think there's the other thing where we're anticipating Monday morning, but we don't have full control over what our day is going to look like. We start to anticipate what's coming up and we don't have full control over our workload, our life, our time, our social life. Our brains start to see this as a bit of a threat. And so for some of us, we move into a fight or flight mode, which is all about, being triggered by moving away from danger. Now, obviously, that is like an internal response to something that we're seeing as a threat that may not be anywhere near as big as we feel it is. But there are some of us that are more likely to experience Sunday Scaries than others. And I want you to think about whether you are one of these people, okay? Are you somebody who has regularly checked your emails over the weekend? Again, by weekend, use whatever language you want to for your time off. Are you somebody who has tasks that you really should have done the week before, but you ran out of time for? Or are you somebody who has really unreasonably high expectations of yourself? If you're answering yes to one or more of those, you are inclined to experience the Sunday Scaries more than other people. If you regularly checked your emails during the weekend, i.e. there was no clarity between work and home, you had tasks left from the previous week, or if you have unrealistically high expectations of yourself. And those things together can combine to this feeling of Sunday Scaries, which then leads us to poor sleep, which then means we start the week in a bad place. And then we decide to try and distract ourselves because, of course, most of human nature involves a preoccupation with ease. Trying to make things easier for ourselves or run from pain, run from discomfort rather than facing it. That's kind of what we do for obvious reasons. But the problem is we then do activities that are quite numbing and unhelpful. There's nothing wrong with watching the telly, but binge watching telly is a passive activity when you know that what you're trying to do is numb the feeling is not great for you. Comfort eating and trying to bring that into your sort of, I'm numbing the way I feel about tomorrow morning by maybe eating more than I should or eating the wrong things. Or picking up my phone and mindlessly scrolling through social media platforms or something of that like are all activities that are distracting and therefore numbing. And again, I say that with no judgment because I have numbed my way through lots of situations. But of these 67% of Britons that frequently experience anxiety on a Sunday, these are the things that people do. If you're aged between 18 and 24, you're most likely to distract yourself with social media. If you're aged between 25 and 32, you are most likely to binge watch TV, and age 33 to 40 are most likely to comfort eat. So it's kind of like choose your numbing there. What are you going to do to try and remove these Sunday Scaries, which are not necessarily the right things to do? There are so many other things we could do that could be much better for us, which I'm going to talk about in a minute. But I hope as you're listening, you might be recognising that these are patterns that you're experiencing. There are certain jobs where Sunday nights become an extension of work. So sometimes if you're a teacher, Sunday night is marking or it's planning or it's I've got to get myself ready for the week ahead. Or it's this idea of you're in a job where the workload is so high that you need to use Sunday nights to get on top of emails a bit so that you feel like your head is clear for the day to start. But the problem is it means that work thoughts and work demands then infiltrate time, which inside of us we're feeling should be ours and should be for rest. And this causes this sort of lack of boundary inside, which causes us to feel stressed. It also causes us to feel a bit cheated. I happen to love what I do, but sometimes I have the Sunday Scaries and it's from a different reason. It's either the workload is so high and I just feel like I'm bouncing from one thing to another and I feel on the back foot. That can cause me to have Sunday Scaries. And another reason can be because my weekend has gone in a flash where I've done loads of stuff that's got to be done, either in my house, with my kids, other kinds of obligations, which I'm very happy for. But I then get to Sunday night and I think, where has it gone? And I feel a bit cheated. So then we do that whole where we cheat ourselves out of sleep. So we then take time out of our late night to try and replenish ourselves with an activity, when actually what that does is just make us even more exhausted, cross with ourselves, and then we start our week in a bad place. So Sunday Scaries can be a sign that you are in work that you really don't enjoy. Sunday Scaries can be a sign that you are in a really toxic workplace. Sunday Scaries can also just be simply a sign that you have overwhelming amounts of stuff to do. So it doesn't have to be that Sunday Scaries means you should go. It could be that your life is imbalanced, your weekend was disappointing, you're feeling a bit burnt out and you can't get your rest and relaxation pot filled to get back on top. You're not sleeping enough and the environment around you is toxic. So I think it's important to think about what is causing your particular Sunday Scary. Recently had my holiday and before the holiday, in the month or so before it, I was probably in a bit of a Sunday Scaries mode. I definitely didn't have the normal amounts of energy for my work. And that was coming back to this idea that I wasn't in equilibrium in terms of like feeling like work and other things were in balance. There was a lot going on and I was constantly drawing from a reserve that was getting emptier and emptier. So having had that break, I now feel quite different. And although I'm quite tired today, I can tell that I've got loads of reserve in a way that I hadn't got beforehand. And so your Sunday Scaries could simply be the balance is off and I need to get my rhythms and routines right. And I think the first thing to do if you're listening to this is to understand that root cause is quite important to know. Is this pointing to a much bigger problem that it might be time to look for other work? Or is it simply that there are some incremental changes that you need to make? And the first one might be how you actually handle the Sunday Scaries in the first place, going back to my points about numbing and what you might do instead. I'm going to give you some other suggestions in a minute about what we can do. But I think before I do, it's important to say that if you've got a bigger change on the horizon, that obviously can't happen overnight. But also, it won't happen if you don't begin to plan towards it. So if you've got the Sunday Scaries and you realise this is a time where you're like, actually, I need to get out of here. It may be 3 months, 6 months, 12 months away before that actually happens. That's where I would say to you to commit to some coaching, commit to some self-development, and start to put pen to paper around the life that you are wanting to move closer to. And then begin to work backwards from that as to what you might do to get yourself closer to that. So if in 12 months from now you want a different profession, what are you going to do in the next 3 months so that you are closer to actually being able to move into a different season and remove those Sunday Scaries that you are feeling, or at least for a while? So the bigger change involves planning, it involves investment in yourself. But for a lot of us, like me, it isn't about needing the whole life change. It's about making some tweaks so we feel better about the work that we do. And I want to just explain a little bit before I get on to some practical ideas why purpose is so important in this. As you know, when I'm talking about purpose, I'm talking about understanding the person that we are, the unique contribution that we make, the values that we have, a good understanding of what's important to us, and the contribution that we make. And when that stuff is clearer, we can use it as a bit of an antidote for the Sunday Scary. So if I'm feeling like, let's pretend actually, let's say you're in the stay-at-home phase of life and you've got little ones and you're still having that Sunday slump because you're in a relationship and your partner's going back to work and Sunday is the beginning of you doing it on your own and you're at home with the little ones. If you know who you are, you know what your values are, you know what's important to you, and you know what your contribution is, it can add meaning to those things that you've got to do, and it can add meaning to your Monday. If you are going into a workplace that you find challenging for all sorts of reasons, but you know what you do well, you know your contribution, you know what your values are, you can use that to act as an antidote for this narrative of, this is hard work, this is difficult, this asks of me. And you can see that those challenges can have meaning to them. It also grounds you in the bigger picture, because sometimes we're stuck in small tasks that have to be done, and we forget that those small tasks add up to a culture and to a life, and to a contribution that we make. When you look at I'm sitting here answering emails to 50 people this morning, and does this really matter in the grand scheme? Well, actually, all those meaningful interactions, and you being a person that is diligent with your work and makes the receiver of your emails feel treated like a human being, is really meaningful. If you are providing food for your little ones and activities and spending time with them, you are providing meaning to your Monday by understanding that you are helping to shape a human being. And every other work iteration in between that. I think when my children were little, I remember a friend of mine, Fiona, saying to me that when she was feeling like overwhelmed with tasks, I've got, the laundry to do, and I've got toys to pick up, and the bathroom's a mess, and you could use the same for that feeling of mundane stuff that you've got to do at work. I've got 100 emails to send. Rather than saying, I have to do this, or I'm so annoyed I've got to do this, she would change it to, I get to peg up my child's washing. I get to send these emails to some clients. I get to speak to this group of people. I get to sit in this meeting and share my thoughts. And seeing stuff as like something to be grateful for and a contribution to the life that we're looking for can actually just shift some of our negativity bias and see something a bit differently. It can help us prioritise what really matters. Purpose helps you see, yes, actually, you're right, this is misaligned with my purpose, and the reason I have Sunday Scaries is because I'm doing something that does not fit with the life I want to lead. And so having that good understanding of our personality, our purpose, our values, the contribution that we're making can help us have the courage to say, I don't want to feel like this anymore, and it's time for me to step away. And it moves us from a place of fear to feeling more in control, because we can control the way we approach something. We can control the way we see a situation, the preparation we put in place, and the adjustments that we make. And it stops us feeling like we're just passengers in our life and we're not able to make the changes that we might want to. So that's why purpose is important. And alongside that, I just want to share a couple of helpful to-dos that you can think about how to handle this transition from the Sunday to Monday feeling. What can you actually do? If you are somebody listening to this and you are currently spending Sunday nights avoiding and numbing through passive activities that then actually just make you frustrated with yourself, let me give you some tips and tricks to think about this a little bit differently. Number one, as I've said, work out what's going on and what's the root cause of your Sunday Scaries. Then number two, I would say one of the best pieces of advice is to ease into your Monday. So researchers have found that feeling down on a Monday often stems from lower levels of competence, i.e. feeling capable, and lower levels of autonomy, feeling in control. So if we can ease into our Monday by starting with something that we're good at, we have high competence in, and ending with something that feels a bit more fun, can make a massive difference to that day. There's all sorts of variations of this, depending on what your work looks like. Is there a way to have a positive start to your Monday so that you first of all get up well, start your day well with good practices, and make sure you build in some time to plan your week? Some of the most successful people in terms of productivity and the way they approach their work will talk to you about the importance of both bookends of your week. On a Friday, finishing off well, that means writing a to-do list for the week ahead, seeing what you have completed, celebrating what's been done, and planning out your week ahead, or doing that on a Monday morning if you prefer. It can be a really good idea to try and build that into your Friday night or whenever the end of your working week is, so that you feel like you've emotionally and cleared the decks and you know what's coming in the week ahead. I remember listening to Oliver Burkeman talk about to-do lists and that feeling of I've just got so much. And he would talk about having a long list of all the things that you've got on your plate, and that's a non-active list. And then you've got a short list of things that you're going to achieve in that next, 5 things that you're going to get achieved. And if there are things still hanging on that on a Friday, one of the best psychological things you can do is to look at your week ahead and decide when those things are going to get done. And I would say pop them on your your diary, I literally will write on my diary, prepare this presentation in a slot. So that when I feel stressed that I've got overhanging to-dos from the week before, I know when they're going to happen, and that gives me some autonomy back and it reduces my sense of stress. So have a think about your working week and the start of your working week, and have a think about how you can use that first couple of hours and that hour or so before work so that you set yourself off in a better direction. If you are a really busy working parent and you say, Hannah, I haven't got an hour before work because I'm doing the school run and I'm throwing my kids out the car and I'm dashing off and I've got a coffee in the car and I haven't had breakfast, what could a 5-minute change look like? Like, again, don't decry the small changes. What would it look like for you to just take 5 minutes and then grab some time later in the day to kind of reassess? Or maybe you need to be somebody who does it on the Friday night so that your Mondays are clear from some of that thinking because you've already done it on a Friday. For some of us, I know this is hard because we're quite instant people, or we're not so good at planning. And that's where some of these practices can help us when we don't do these things naturally. By nature, I'm not necessarily the most planned individual, but I know that in order to cope, I've had to put some things in place that don't come so naturally to me. The second thing you can do is to think about this negativity bias that I've already spoken about, reframing things to, looking for the good in a day, thinking about the opportunities that might be afforded to you. Where can you use your strengths? What is there to be grateful for in this? And looking for the things that prove the opposite to what you're feeling. If you're going into a day thinking, I'm going to have another day of rude customers and miserable people, you will find them. But if you go into the day thinking, I'm going to look for those people who are looking for connection or who are grateful, you will also find those too. So I think there's something to be said about our mindset and the things that we allow ourselves to listen to. I think that also goes for colleagues that can be miserable, and how we can be different to that culture and be careful with our words, because what we are swimming in is what it then feels like. So I think that's something else I'd say. The third point is to have a good look at your weekends and build in the right amount of rest versus chores, responsibilities, visiting, all of that stuff that feels right for you. If you are regularly coming to the end of the weekend, as quite frankly I am sometimes, and you feel like the weekend hasn't been what you need it to be, think about what tweaks and changes you can bring in place. I think some of this is to do with my expectation. If I have an expectation that I'm going to have a day where I can read or I can potter about a bit, and then the day doesn't unfold like that, I can feel again a bit cheated. And I think the more we can set our expectations for each weekend well, in every life stage we're in, whether that's singleness or, you're with a partner but there's no children, you've got little children, grown-up children, retirement, any life stage you like, there are busy things going on for us all. There's always stuff that can be done. And I think we have to recognise what our capacity is in any given season, and also what do we need to feel good about the weekend that we've just had. And some of that is on me and some of that is on you. And if you're in a season where you are particularly stretched, it might be just about where can I make half an hour of difference. For others of us, it could be that actually we are our own worst enemies and we're not prioritising the right things, and that's why the weekend feels too short and too full. Kind of built into point number 3 is number 4, which is create some more healthy boundaries. The fact we work from home, the invention of smartphones, laptops, the amount of connectivity we have is amazing for flexibility, but it also is very difficult for boundary. I am not a boundaried person, and every one of us is going to be different about this. There'll be some of you listening to this and you're like, I will never check in on my emails when I'm outside of work, and that's fine, don't. But I would say if you're somebody that is a bit more blurred with their boundaries, which is a lot of us, we just need to be careful. We need to be careful that it doesn't just continually encroach. There is a difference between choosing to have a look at something because actually it's helpful for us to check a couple of emails, to a compulsion where we feel if I do not keep looking at this stuff, I am overwhelmed, I'm constantly behind, and I just can't keep up with everybody else. That is different. And each one of us have to decide how much blur we can cope with. Loads of professions have blur. And I think it would be ridiculous of me to suggest that they don't. But we have to work out what we can handle. And again, it goes with this sort of disappointment versus expectations. What helps you and what doesn't. And I actually think perhaps sometimes Sunday night laptopping isn't ideal for us to have the best preparation for the week ahead, even though we think it's helping us feel ready? Would we do better to do that piece of reflective kind of or planning on a Friday, or even starting earlier on the Monday, so that it doesn't encroach into a space where we don't want to? I mean, ultimately, you've got to do you, and you know what works for you. But boundary and a bit less in-out blurring is going to be good for us. As I said to you, the worst people hit by Sunday Scaries were those who regularly check their emails during the weekend. That is because your brain is remaining in that mode and isn't having the R&R that we need, even though we think we don't need it. I can't tell you how different I feel in my body having had a break. And it's quite hard to quantify. It's not like there's anything I could particularly explicitly say, but I can tell my mind is sharper. My body is feeling like it has reserves. And we all need those mini breaks of, diversion during the day, rest at a weekend, holidays every year if possible. So think about your boundary and where is it too blurred, and how do you, if you are spending, I don't know, let's say you spend at the moment 10 hours a week doing work at home on top of your working hours, I can't tell you to stop doing that, because it will be very difficult for you. Your next goal would be to bring it down to 8 hours a week. And then your next goal would be bring it down to 6 hours a week, to a place that then feels okay. You can't go from that amount of blurred boundary to nothing without it having severe impact on you and your work and your workplace. So again, it's about these incremental tweaks where we say, right, I'm no longer going to do that on this night of the week, and I'm no longer going to do that. I'm going to take my notifications off, or little tweaks that help bring back the balance. And I think the last point I was going to make, I've already said, tie up loose ends as much as possible before the working week ends. If you work from home, do a bit of closure. Don't just close your laptop and leave it out, but maybe do a few things that signal that you have come to the end of the working week or the end of this period of work. Tidy it away, tidy the paperwork away, and make a list that helps you feel prepared for that Monday ahead. I think if we can get that rhythm and routine and practice in place, it really does help us feel better about the Sunday Scaries. And I also think we have to recognise that sometimes this is going to happen because, as I said before, by nature, we sometimes want to choose easy. And easy isn't always best for us. And that's where we've got to understand this natural transition between rest and relaxation back to work. We all have post-holiday blues to some level or another, because we've been in a season and we've got to adjust to it being another one again. And we're really funny as human beings that we kind of want all of these different kinds of seasons in our life, and we're never quite satisfied with any of them. But the more you know your purpose, the more you understand who you are, the more you understand the why underneath the what, the better you can cope with those Sunday Scaries. Can I encourage you, when you're thinking about the stuff you've got ahead of you in tomorrow or the week ahead, the mundane things that may feel a bit dull, or you've lost sight of why they matter, think about the why underneath the activity that you have to do, and it can really shift the way your brain sees it, and help you do the stuff that sometimes doesn't feel as fulfilling. And make a decision: is this a sign that a bigger change is on the horizon, or is this about me reframing my mindset, getting the balance right, bringing some boundaries back so that the Sunday Scaries reduce, because I know the root cause and I'm going to live differently, so that I'm rested, and I can get up and think, actually, my work is meaningful, and aren't I fortunate to get to do it? I'd love to talk to you about this. If this is something that you're facing, or you've had experience of this, or you've got some tips of how to cope with it, drop us an email. It's hannah@hellosidekick.co. Please feel free to get in touch. If you're listening to this and your Sunday Scaries are Sunday Scaries, Monday Scaries, Tuesday Scaries, Wednesday Scaries, and you need to make a shift, I want to encourage you to get involved with my coaching program. Come and do the Purpose Pursuit and find out much more about why you're having this anticipatory dread, which is bigger than just a Sunday Scary, and make the change you're looking for. Remember also, the book version of my course comes out on the 4th of December. You can pre-order that now in any good bookshop. I'd love to help you, and those resources will give you everything you need. See you next week. Bye-bye.